I am your host, Leslie Dowling. I am a corporate speaker sharing how one can jumpstart your path to increase revenue and productivity through restorative health techniques. And today is a pleasure to introduce my guest, Traci Prendergast. She is a functional nutrition licensed practitioner, a patient advocate, and chef. So there's so many questions I have for you, Traci, but I guess I'll start with really what made you take the culinary path and getting into functional health and modalities.
Um, well, I studied abroad in college in Chile, and it was in that year that I kind of began to really experiment with cooking and realized that it was more than just a hobby, but a passion that I wanted to pursue and work. So after I finished school, university, I went to cooking school and then started to work in the food industry.
Oh wow. And so is it something that you as a child did you grow up with just eating healthy and just living off of what Mother Earth provides, eating whole foods, or you kind of switch gears as you grew up and found different ways of approaching lifestyles?
Um, yeah, I mean, I grew up in kind of a modern family in Los Angeles. The microwave was, central in our kitchen, and um,
Mhm.
things came out of boxes and cans. But my parents also liked cooking and cooked quite a bit, so I would say it was a mixture, but definitely not like you know harvesting food from our garden kind of situation.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I
So,
think what inspired me about cooking was just the way that you pull all these ingredients together, and in that offering, it kind of it brings people together and can transform. It can transform the ways people relate. So I really was drawn to this the alchemy of cooking and how
mhm.
that could connect people.
And was there anybody that was your role model or somebody that you respected and looked up to really guide you or gave you that drive and passion behind what you're doing today?
Well, when I first started cooking, I would say I was really inspired by chef in LA, Suzanne Goin. I think she has a handful of restaurants now, but this was like 20 years ago. She was, she was one of very few female chefs. She was composting. She was buying directly from farmers and ranchers, and I did an internship in her kitchen while I was in cooking school,
Oh, wow.
and I just loved. She's like a really good person and a great leader and a smart businesswoman too. All
Hmm.
all of those things on their own are kind of rare in the food industry, but to have one person, so well balanced, is as I learned, later down the road, that ended up being the most inspired environment I worked in, and it
Hmm.
was my kind of first gig. But she continued to be an inspiration to me, eh, when I cooked professionally for the following decades.
Okay. Wow. And so where are you living today and what are you currently doing?
I live with my husband and two kids in West Marin, which is about 45 minutes northwest of San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
And we we spent we've lived here for about a decade, but we took a year and a half to live on a sailboat, um, and just returned in June. So we're kind of still getting our bearings on land after,
Wow.
a couple years on the water.
That is amazing. And who is the adventurous one? Is it your husband, or I guess both of you? And how did your kids take to it? I'd love for you to kind of share your experience and your take home, like, wow, wisdom after a year or so on this boat. What is it that you could share with everybody that's listening today?
Yeah. Yeah, good questions. Well, my husband he's definitely the more of the watery of the two of us. And he was definitely driving this dream, but I was completely on board. I I was excited about having more daily access to nature.
Mm-hmm.
Um, once you have kids and you get into school and the system and activities, you're kind of plugged into this certain way of life, and it's
Yeah.
hard to really have your own path when you've got kids and you're um, just embedded in a community. And so I was ready to have some more freedom about how we raised our kids, and just choices about where we go. Or there's a lot more freedom in some ways living on a boat. Um, and I would say, like, the takeaways or what we got from it is, uh, I can see this now that the kids are home and back in school,
Mm-hmm.
but um, they're really appreciating what we have at home. Just having teachers, having professionals teaching as opposed to
Sure.
their parents, having after school activities and play dates, and just the ease at which so much is available on the boat. So much of our daily tasks went towards really basic things like making water, um, getting food, preparing food, homeschooling, uh, and my daughter would say, "Can we do this today?" And the answer was always, "Well, depends on what the wind's doing and if the fuel dock is open, and if these
Yeah.
three other things happen, then maybe." So they, I feel like, at least in the US, or
Mm-hmm.
in the parts where we're living, kids, it's almost like parents are serving their kids nowadays. And there's like an entitlement to,
Yeah.
yes, we have school, and yes, we have activities. And by living outside of that system for a while, I think our kids, they don't take it for granted, and they're like really just inherently grateful. It's not something we taught them, it's something the experience taught them. And
Mm-hmm.
therefore, I think they're happier because they appreciate, they have gratitude. And that
Yeah.
was just, yeah, not something we
Wow.
conveyed. And yeah, I think there's like self-sufficiency and ruggedness that's required to really live on a boat. And so I see how it's boosted their confidence in social situations and just moving through life with a lot more ease. I think that's true for all of us.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? And how old are they that they
8 and
experience?
11.
That's an awesome age, because it's not like they're too young not to remember, and yet those years are really so critical. And I bet you one day they'll reflect back and just how it has opened and expanded their horizons of just appreciating, like you said, nature and all the things that we take for granted, when we're here grounded, and not on a boat. So I was just curious, like, all these questions are coming through, and I'm thinking to myself, well, how did you figure out or map out, like, where you were going to stop to get your food? And did you learn a lot about the different cultures? Like, did you spend some time at your destinations and, just talk with the local people? I saw on your blog, it was very interesting. You were explaining all the different foods that you would gather and freeze things and what you were eating. So maybe you could embellish on that, since we're in the functional realm as practitioners.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the nutrition piece was really pushed my edges, and made me understand better how the the types of access to food people have in many parts of the world and how hard it is to really eat well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I guess to your first piece about where we chose to go, the first year we started with the boat in Florida, and we sailed it down to Grenada, which is just a little bit north of Venezuela. And uh, so it's quite a bit of southerly sailing, but it's also quite a bit of easterly sailing, which um, in that part of the world is against the wind. The wind is coming from Europe going
Mm-hmm.
across. And so, in order to make any headway going east, you have to wait until usually there's a storm system in the north that kind of pulls all the wind up and things quiet down. And then you just beeline and you
Mm-hmm.
kind of get as far as you can until the wind picks up again. There's not a lot of opportunities. It's mostly like in the winter after hurricane season and early spring that these weather windows open to be able to make easterly progress. And it was about 1,000 nautical miles of easterly progress we needed to make. So
Wow.
we were not choosing where we went the first year. It was just the weather was deciding kind of. And then there
Interesting.
was something actually liberating about that because when you have a trip planned, normally you're like planning all the details and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And, I only have a week and we spent all this money. And so there's like already inherently expectations
Yeah,
in a vacation where if things don't work out, it's easier to be disappointed. But
sure.
for us, we would get to this place we had no intention of going because that's where the wind brought us. And then there was just like less pressure to check things off the list, or we were still needing to tend to our basic needs. And that took up a lot of our time, but we
Sure.
that
Yeah.
said, we spent a good amount of time in the Bahamas and Puerto Rico our first year. um,
Wow.
yeah.
And is there any place that you want to go back to or just was so impressed with the food, the culture, the people that you were not expecting?
I would say, yeah, in terms of food and culture, I really love Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm.
We were there about 5 weeks, and I felt like we were just starting to scratch the surface.
Oh, wow.
And in part because the boat was taking up some of our energy. But
Yeah.
yeah, I would love to go back there. I was really surprised about the history of Puerto Rico, and just from a nautical perspective in particular, it was the beginning of this European kind of exploration that
Mm-hmm.
changed the shape of the Caribbean. That's um, that's where boats started, and there's like a very protected bay, and the currents kind of go straight from Europe to Puerto Rico. So to be there
Yeah.
and really see that, and have traveled there by boat, you really
Mhm.
kind of get to feel, wow, this is like the world changed here in a way we don't always feel in the States because our history is so
That's
young.
interesting. Yeah, it's interesting because as a little girl, I spent a lot of time. Every holiday, we would go visit Puerto Rico because my father lived there for 5 years, and the Old San Juan and that whole area, I guess, is sort of like that inlet that I never realized, and just the fortress, and it's so beautiful and rich in culture, and it's really a great place a destination. So I'm assuming everybody has their sea legs because if you're going to be on a boat for that amount of time, I would hope that, I mean, what did you do? Like, I know with the wind, I was in Hawaii and we were going around and touring. And when the winds picked up, man, it was like we were just bouncing. And I never experienced anything like that. So um, I'd love to hear, like, did you always have your sea legs?
Mhm. It's interesting because
Yeah.
when I first met my husband, I don't know, 18 years ago, he lived on a boat,
Oh, okay.
And um, I used to get really seasick. We would just go out in the San Francisco Bay. We went out of the bay a few times. And my experience has been, and I've spoken to other women sailors who've had a similar experience, which is there is a correlation between anxiety and seasickness. It's
Oh,
not always direct, and it's not true
interesting.
for everybody. But for me, the less control I felt over a situation, where I'm on a boat, somebody's a captain, I don't know anything about this, and I'm just at the mercy of whatever's
Yeah,
happening.
right.
I would I used to get really sick or just
Mm,
feeling completely out of my comfort zone. And the more I learned, the more I was able to participate in what was happening, um, the less sick I got. So that's one piece. And then um, we were very conservative about weather. I was kind of the one checking the weather, and we just wouldn't go out.
yep.
We would wait until the conditions were we had nothing to prove. We weren't looking for, you know, at least I was not, and my husband, you know,
Yeah,
respected that. I wasn't looking to kind of test my skills against the elements.
great. Yeah. And I never thought about that when you were saying you kind of respected Mother Nature and when it was a good time to travel and be safe instead of mapping out. I think we're just so hardwired and programmed like, okay, we're going to do this. And, you go on vacation or we're going to this destination. But I love the way that, and the thing is for someone that is doing an excursion like this, did you talk to other people or what was that a fundamental like that was like on your bucket list like number one, we're just going to go where it's safe, where the winds will take us and we're not going to say we have to get to this island and that island. I find that very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, there's amazing resources nowadays. I mean, it's so wild to think people just got in a boat and went with like
Yeah.
no idea of what was happening. If you're going anywhere for less than 3 days, there's pretty great weather data nowadays. Like, there's no reason
Mm,
for you to get into any weather trouble if it's a relatively short passage.
right.
In terms of safety and security, um, there's great resources online too, and the sailing community is very tight knit in a way. So any kind of incidents that happen get reported on this network, and so
Okay.
then you can look up each place you're thinking of going and see like what's the crime report. And
Wow.
uh, for the most part, there weren't a lot of places we avoided
Hmm.
because of that type of safety, but there some of the islands in the Grenadines we skipped because they're just a little
Wow.
bit too lawless.
So what is on your bucket list for your next project? Or,
Mhm.
the other question is, what are you guys doing now?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so
Well,
I'd love
it's
to
a
hear.
daily conversation in these parts where we still have the boat. I think the kids and I are craving more time on land. I really want to dig into work more in ways I haven't been able to.
Hmm.
Um, and we're in an active conversation about what does that mean with the boat? Do we keep it? Uh, does my husband do some sailing on his own and we meet up with him, or
Hmm.
do we sell the boat and have more land based adventures? So um
Sure.
not sure, but I'm just I'm really excited about work and learning and growing and practicing, and also just taking care of my own health. It was challenging at times on the boat to like have regular exercise, to get a good
Um,
amount of fiber, to have you know any control over like the quality of ingredients. Um,
yeah.
so
Oh,
so
so
it was very limited.
is everybody on board with eating healthy? I mean, having kids, I know I would play this reverse psychology. So I would always bring home healthy things for them to eat, but I wouldn't restrict them if they would go over to friends' houses and there were certain things that they were eating that I knew was not the best thing for them. So, and I think that kind of helped as I have the 16, 21, and 24-year-old. The older ones are like, Mom, thanks for really implementing good, healthy lifestyle modalities. And we would hike and do things. And so now it's like coming back. So it wasn't like I was so strict that they went bonkers when they went off to school and, ate junk all the time. So how was it on the boat? I mean, I guess when you're on a boat, you got to just eat what is available.
Yes. Yeah. And you rely a lot more on pantry staples, which just ends up being more grain heavy
Mm-hmm.
than we eat at home. So yeah, I think we all got more rice and beans in our diet than we wanted.
Arroz con pollo. Always good though.
But
So
yeah, I agree with what you're saying about just the balance of, I mean, the
yeah.
amount of crap out there in the world that the kids have access to is just
Oh, absolutely.
completely bonkers
Yeah.
right now. And so it's about just providing healthy examples at home and talking
Mm-hmm.
about it and then letting them experiment and be free out in the world
Yeah.
so that they can kind of start to make those decisions for themselves.
So for everybody that's listening to our viewers, and um, how can people reach out to you? And do you have any special packages or anything that you're doing that's in the works that you'd like to share, today?
Yes, thank you for asking.
Mm-hmm.
Best way to reach me is either through my website, traciprendergast.com, or email Traci at hueso.org. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook also. And I have one package available at the moment that is it's a 16-week functional nutrition reset,
Ooh.
and it's I'm having a lot of fun with it. It's pretty comprehensive, and we dive into a lot of different realms based
Mm-hmm.
on what someone's goals are and what's going on in their body, and kind of use that to figure out the order in which we take things on health related. But I'm just, yeah, it's been so great to be able to dedicate myself to this practice more fully, and I'm really enjoying. Yeah.
That's awesome. And for people that I know 25 years ago or so when I started on this path of just really amping it up, being really so fine-tuned, reading all packages and labels and educating myself and going back to school for functional health. Um, what kind of tips can you give somebody that's just starting out, that
Mhm.
wants to start cooking at home and really integrating a tradition with their children, to prep and help them? What are some of the things that stick out in your head that can kind of guide people?
Hmm. That's a good question. Let me think about that for a second, because I do a lot of hand holding with my clients and, like,
Okay,
meeting them where they are with cooking. Everybody's coming from a different place of
sure.
desire to cook, or inspiration or willingness. Um, so do you think in terms of like cooking tips or just general eating?
Yeah, I let's start with general eating and then cooking tips, because I always love everybody after listening to my podcast to just, take something home with them to be like, wow, I really learned, or I gained some, insight, or maybe I'll take a trip around the world and get my husband to figure out how we're going to do this, but especially us in the functional health realm, maybe start with one and then maybe give a little bit of inspiration as to how they can, what they can do. So,
Yeah, I think if I had to pick kind of three places to start with food, it would probably be, um, for most people, upping the amount of vegetables they're getting in their diet overall.
Mm-hmm.
Usually we can use more fiber than we're getting. Um, and then also taking a look at what fats you're using in your diet, and that's a really easy way to improve your health, which doesn't require much effort. So getting rid of all of the kind of unhealthy seed oils, and um, making sure that they're cooking with, like using avocado oil, using fats appropriately based on their oxidation points. So um, in my experience, olive oil is a bit of a wild card in terms of if you can cook it or not. They're all different. They have different oxidation points. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, I tend to tell people to just use it for cold applications like salad dressing. So that's two fats. And then the third would be like clean meats, so wild fish and grass-fed meats. And I do try to get people using pastured chicken, but that's a bit of requires stewing. You can't throw pastured chicken on the grill. You have
Interesting. I didn't even know that. Okay.
Yeah, you have to really slow cook it because they're, um, most chickens raised for meat are very young and the meat is
Mhm.
tender.
Right.
Um, and they don't, they're caged, so they're not moving around a lot. But
Yeah.
pastured chickens who are eating bugs and grass, they're walking a lot more. Their muscles are more developed. So you have to, cook them
Wow.
as a stew for many hours, but it's really the most delicious thing you'll eat.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah.
Wow. And what is your number one favorite type of cooking? What is your go-to as
My
a
hus-
chef? I got
my
to ask
husband would say I never make the same meal twice.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
we get we host a pickup site for a farm box,
Oh, wow.
and
That's
and
great.
we get a farm box from this incredible local farm every week, and you never know what's in it. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so I actually really like um, the surprise of like what grew this year and what can I do with it, and the kind of that's fun for me, but I get
Yeah.
that's not fun for everybody. Um, what is Yeah, I would say we're doing a lot of, as it gets colder, we're doing a lot more chicken um, soups, and I'll make this pastured chicken broth and then um, do different soups with it. So I might make a Thai
Mm-hmm.
vegetable and chicken soup with coconut milk one week, or like a Mexican style tortilla soup another week. So
Ooh,
just using
sounds
that um, base chicken stock as a starting point for different types of soups is probably what I'm just enjoying the cold weather cooking
yeah.
after so long in the tropics.
Wow. And do your children enjoy cooking?
My son, who's older, loves cooking. He likes baking
Oh,
um,
that's great.
and cooking. And my daughter does too. She helps prep. She's very good at cutting things up,
Mm-hmm. That's great.
but she's not one to like in a quiet moment kind of amble into the kitchen and make something. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if that will come later, but she does enjoy it. But my son is really like, he likes to watch these pastry chefs that are doing crazy stuff online. We watch videos and
Yeah.
then play around with it, and he's good.
And I think the beauty of, in this day and age, you could Google things. Like my son is great at making the perfect, like medium rare steak. And I'm like, what's that beeping noise? He goes, oh, I told Google, like, I have to turn it after 2.5 minutes, and I'm sauteing it with all this stuff. And I think just seeing me in the kitchen with my mother and always embracing having them cooking. And there was something called, and I don't know if it's on the West Coast, but here on the East Coast, it's called Young Chef Academy. So as little boys, they would go at 4, 5, 6 years of age, just do simple things and learn how to use a knife. And I think that really was also the catalyst of getting them in the kitchen. So, I mean, in my next life, I do want to be a chef. I love to dabble. And when I have time, my heart and soul's into it. And so I love Gosh, I'm like living vicariously through your adventures, but we would love to see if, I mean, do you think you'll ever write a book on your adventures or?
Hmm. I don't know. I think um, I really enjoy the writing process, and I think I'll write a book if there is like a book in me to write. I don't quite feel like there's a quite a book in me. There's some blog posts and maybe long form
Yeah,
articles, but so who knows? Yeah.
who knows?
And I
I
have
mean, I
to say,
really,
I think cooking is better as a hobby than a profession. So,
yeah.
it's a hard way to make a living. Yeah.
But I really like to everybody that's listening. I really enjoyed your blogs. It just took me to another space, and you're just so good with writing and so creative, and so I enjoyed that. Um, and so for everybody, again, how can people contact you? And we just want everybody to write
Yeah.
this down.
Thank
So
you. Through my website, traciprendergast.com, there's a contact form. That's the best way to get a sense of what I do um, and how to get in touch.
perfect. Well, thank you, Tracy. It really was it was fun, and I keep everything kind of organic, and I love my podcasting, meeting people, and just kind of as I listen to you, my questions kind of roll out. So sorry if I put you on the spot with some of these
Perfect.
questions, but I really enjoyed this half an hour with you, and we'll circle back in a couple of months and see what you're doing and how everything is going. So again, thank you for being on my show. And for everyone that's listening, remember, get out there with Mother Earth, start walking, and keep it dirty. Take care, everybody. Take care, Tracy.
Leslie, bye.
Okay.